O'Neill and the special guest host, Attorney Jerome Payne. Live TV talk on your digital device, on Roku, Fire TV, and Apple TV. Download the SVP TV app right now. Check us out every Tuesday on Comcast Cable, Channel 17, 8:30 p.m. And we are live every Friday on Facebook Live, 6 o'clock in the evening. You've got a question? Our attorneys have the answer. So let's talk law with Attorney Daryl O'Neill on the SVP TV network.
Welcome to Talking Law with Daryl O'Neill. I'm your host. I got my main man, Jerome.
What's going on, Daryl? How are you?
We was in the black for a minute
For
ago.
a minute, man. In the black hole.
In the black hole.
Yes, sir.
And look, we're going to bring you a new topic today. We want to talk about, if you want to start your own business, talk about corporations and the different types of corporations and which is better, you know, and better is a relative term.
Yes,
But
yes.
we're going to talk about some of that stuff.
Yes.
Firstly, if you got Apple TV, Fire Stick, Roku, the SVP TV network app, Facebook Live, or YouTube Live, you can call in and ask any questions you want to ask, regardless of what topic we're talking about. And you know what? The sad thing is we make that option, we make that offer every show.
Sure do, Daryl. We sure do.
But anyway, regardless of that, got to say shout outs to California, shout outs to Little Rock, Arkansas, shout outs to West Memphis, Arkansas, shout outs to Memphis, Shelby County, shout outs to Mississippi, shout outs to the great state of Missouri,
Oh, yeah.
and
Okay.
shout out to my family, and then shout out to Jerome's
Hey, family. Yeah.
Always got to give them shout outs to family,
For
man.
sure.
Yeah. So, Jerome, you know, corporations, you know, we always hear that thing, you know, and corporations got pros and cons.
For sure. Yeah.
But what is a corporation?
But Daryl, I'm glad you said that because it may not be for everyone, just like you said. Sometimes it's the best thing, and sometimes it can be the worst thing.
Right.
So let's just start out with a sole proprietorship.
Yeah.
That means that you have this wonderful idea, and you strike out looking for gold, but you don't put up on any of these numbers or letters behind it. You just strike out for gold.
Right.
And so at that point, everything is being done in your own, what they call your religious name,
Yeah.
the name that's on your birth certificate. Right.
Your birth name.
Your
yeah.
birth name, that's right. And so you are what they call a sole proprietorship, which means that any actions or anything that comes about, you are personally responsible for everything that goes on there. And so the government created this idea of a shield. When you say so, there.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Shield.
So there's a something because we realize that if you are out there servicing the public or doing anything outside of your normal working as an employee, you are exposing yourself
Right.
to circumstances that many times are beyond your control. So they created this thing called a corporation.
Right.
And so whenever anything new is created, it comes in layers. So that may be a way of looking at it there. So it's a shield to keep you from having personal responsibility, because everything that you have earned and tried to keep can be exposed to being lost as a sole proprietor.
Yeah, I like that, Jerome. So, you know, but you know, so I operate my business, and I've done it for 20 plus years as a sole proprietor.
Well, and I've gone to sole proprietorship too as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let me just tell you, you know, so you set up a corporation, and we'll talk about that a little more.
Yeah.
But the whole purpose of setting a corporation is because a corporation is a person of itself.
Exactly.
And so
It's an entity.
an entity of
Right,
itself.
I like that.
Or and again, individual is not the right word because individual connotates maybe human.
But I think so.
Yeah, but it's an entity like you just said.
That's right.
But in layman's terms, it's a person.
That's right.
And so the problem with a corporation is when you have a sole proprietorship, if anything goes wrong, you don't want to have lawyers, you don't want to have whatever, and you want to take care of something. As a sole proprietor, you can go down there and do it yourself.
That's exactly right. And also, too, that's one of the, because it is an esoteric type thing, it's hard to get lay people to understand I'm operating, why is another entity telling me what I can do with money that comes through my hands?
Right. Right.
So it's hard to make them understand that there's a divination between you and this corporation. And many times, because we don't understand it, a lot of our people wind up in serious trouble,
Yeah.
particularly with nonprofits.
Right.
Yeah.
And glad we'll talk about nonprofits in a little bit, something a little more.
Okay.
But so let's talk about this sole proprietorship because I really want to play with that for just a minute, Jerome.
Okay.
So sole proprietorship, that doesn't mean that you're not a business.
That's right. No.
So,
not
so
at all.
but like I said, as a sole proprietorship, the law says that any person can represent themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So as a sole proprietor, if there's a scenario that you need to
That's
get
a good
something
point.
done
I like that.
right now,
That's a good point.
you can do it yourself
That's a good point.
just to preserve the status quo.
Right.
You can do it yourself. For instance, if you get sued as a sole proprietor, you can actually go to court and just write a little letter and say, I disagree with this, and sign it
That's right.
and turn it in. And the court will accept that as an answer.
I like that, Darryl, because corporations must have attorneys.
Right.
So that's a burden on some corporations, some people, because they can't really afford it
Really
because
afford
you just really got started.
Right.
So now you got to go out and hire a lawyer
Right.
to defend you, rather than you being able to go in court and in fact, you can't say anything.
Right, right.
If you're
Yeah, I mean,
in court.
if you're a sole proprietor, I mean, if you are a corporation, again, we'll talk a little deep. If you're a corporation, you can't practice law.
That's right.
So if your corporation is being sued, you cannot practice law.
That's right.
So you have to hire a lawyer. So those are some of the benefits to sole proprietorship. The other thing about a sole proprietorship is, regardless of what you think, because you don't have this corporate this distance between you and all the other people, a sole proprietorship, you can run it just like a regular business.
Sure.
For instance, you get a tax ID number, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can say, your name, you can say the company name doing business as, or whatever you want to do. You can set up insurance protections
True.
that will allow you the same protections that you would have if you were a corporation.
That's exactly right.
You know.
And so, Darryl, so even with a corporation, you still could wind up with some personal
Absolutely.
liability,
Right.
which would be the same as if you were a sole proprietor.
That's the best way, that's the easiest way, that's the cheapest way, and that's the fastest way. Sole proprietorship.
Right.
The next one is corporations. No, let's do something simple, John.
Okay.
Let's do partnerships.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. You were right.
Yeah, because partnerships is different than corporations.
And partnership may be the scariest.
Oh my God, it is scary. It's absolutely.
The scariest one of all, because unless, however, you're very selective about whom it is that you decide to go in business with.
Yeah. So let me just say, everybody thinks that as a partnership, you got to have some type of agreement or some type of document to establish that there's a partnership. Let me just tell you, that's not true.
That's not true. You're right. I agree.
If you and somebody are doing something together for the benefit of each other, that's a partnership.
That's exactly right. Unless you can clearly say that, don't you think? that
Well,
you can clearly say
yeah, 'cause-
that though Daryl and I doing this selling lemonade together, we are not partners.
Yeah, you could specifically
Individually.
say, right? You know, and you see that a lot
Right.
in certain types of law offices.
That's right.
What you'll see is you say an association of attorneys.
That's exactly right.
And then it says specifically not a partnership.
not a partnership, right?
So I mean, if you're specifically putting it out there to identify that you're not a partners with
That's
all
right.
these people, then you're not a partner.
Because the reason why is because it's confusing to the public with who I'm dealing with.
Right.
And because the public would think just because you two are doing business, so to speak, together, that you are a partnership, and so not necessarily that there's an individual.
Right.
And so that has to be clearly stated somewhere, somehow, and made known to the public that no, we are not partners, and as you said, sharing space, an association of attorneys, but specifically not a partnership.
Yeah. So, but if you are a partnership, like I said, you can be a partnership without an agreement.
Right.
But if you are a partnership, the first and foremost thing that you need to do is get an agreement.
It's the committed to writing. There, I love that sometimes
Yeah.
you say that the worst thing that you can do is not taking care to make sure that even in the worst of times, that's when you really need to
Right.
have some structure and something in writing to guide anybody who's trying to decipher
Yeah.
what you all meant.
Right.
You know, the meaning of the mind.
Yeah. You know, a partnership, again, is just a contract.
Right.
But here's what I tell people. You never go into partnership with someone that you can't marry.
Interesting.
And here's the reason why. That's what a partnership is. It is a marriage. And so if it's a partnership and it's a marriage, again, most people hate to hear that. They have a thing called prenuptial agreement.
Right.
They have a thing called anti-nuptial agreement.
Right.
So a partnership is just an agreement. So you're gonna put together an agreement. And in this agreement, what you're gonna do, when we're starting off, we are supposed to be on the best of terms.
Oh, no question about it.
We can agree on everything.
Everybody's bright-eyed.
Dog, we
Bushy
boys.
tail,
Yeah.
yeah.
We boys, man. I've known you back in the day.
Yeah, we grew up together,
We
you
grew
know,
up.
yeah.
Man, we ain't gonna never have no problem.
Right.
So
Right.
this is when the time you put it in right.
Absolutely.
What happens if you disagree on something? What happens if you split? What happens if somebody dies?
Right.
What happens if somebody doesn't pay their part of it?
That's right.
You know, what happens if somebody doing something to the detriment of the partnership?
Somebody does something stupid like sexual harassment or something like that, or they're embezzling
Yeah.
funds,
Right.
or a product hurt somebody.
Yeah.
That you said, do not release this product, but they do it behind your back
Right.
anyway.
Right.
So, but also too, there's some types there. A partner can be a silent partner too as well.
It can.
And not necessarily involved in the business too.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but all of that's probably contracted.
Right.
So whenever you have somebody, I'm gonna contribute a certain amount of money.
That's right.
I don't want to get in the middle of the business. You know, you see this in the NBA all the time.
Right.
Very few NBA owners are 100% owners.
Oh, okay.
You know, what ends up happening is, the NBA is one of the few organizations that is that way.
Okay.
But there's always somebody who wants to be the front man. And so the front man will be all the front page and all this other stuff. You know, most people don't realize this. The Charlotte Hornets. No, it's the Bobcats.
Okay, yeah, I remember.
It's the Bobcats. Is it the Bobcats?
Bob Johnson.
Robert Johnson.
Yeah, but got them
the CEO
started, yeah.
of BET.
Used to be BET owner.
BET owner.
Right,
He owned Charlotte.
right.
And what ended up happening is Michael Jordan wanted to buy a basketball team, wanted to be a part of the basketball team. But Robert Johnson was the primary owner, and Michael Jordan was the minority owner, and Michael Jordan was the face of the franchise. You never heard much about Robert Johnson.
Never heard much
He
about
stayed
him
behind
at
the
all,
scenes,
yeah.
even though he was a majority owner. Later on, he sold out to Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan became the majority owner, so on and so forth. So you put that in a partnership plan, a partnership agreement, and then that's how it's all set up.
That's right. That's right.
You know, But if you don't put together a writing, I promise you, you are going to have your absolute nightmare at some point.
And if you fail to identify the roles and what the partnership is about, there is somebody that wears one of them robes.
Black robe will tell.
Will
Black
tell
robe
you.
will do it, boy.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you never want that. You never want someone who was not a part of the agreement to come in and tell you
what your agreement
right,
is.
what your agreement was.
Yeah,
You never want that.
This is your agreement.
Right.
Y'all, that ain't my agreement. I don't remember talking nothing about it. It is.
And so it's really easy to determine many times by course of dealings.
Right.
You can so that's how the black robe person would look at the course of dealings and determine what it was that you all have agreed on.
Yeah.
So you don't want that. And so there are, people always talk about, I can't afford an attorney. You cannot afford not to have.
Yeah, you can't afford it not to have an attorney. But you
Not
can't.
to have an attorney.
I mean, and I say this all the time, Jerome, and it happens every week at a minimum.
I know it does.
At a minimum, I get somebody that comes in that wants me to try to fix something.
I know.
That all they had to do on the front end is have an agreement.
That's right.
Or have it in writing. And, there is always some ways to deal with matters if you don't have a writing.
Right.
But, man, a writing is just so fundamental, man.
And they say it all the time too about us as a people, is that if you really want to keep something from people of color, is to put it in writing. If you put
it in a book. That's what my daddy used to say. Put it, boy. You want to show how dumb you is? Put it in a book. It's a piece of paper in a book, and will never read it.
They'll never read it.
Yeah.
Because I just don't understand how you would put your whole life savings on something, and usually that's what it is too. You pull your 401k down, all the money that you've been able to earn, and you put it all into this basket, and you have no idea what the rules are of the basket. It's not Easter eggs.
Whatever it is, you don't know. You don't have a clue what's in that. Yeah, I mean.
So do better, people.
Yeah. And so, and that's partnership.
Yeah.
But the real thing about a partnership, and let me just tell you, and we'll talk a little bit more about some other corporations, but the real thing about a partnership is you have to have a writing.
That's right.
It's not that it's required, because it's not, but it's necessary. Again, I promise you, when you go lease a piece of property you go rent a piece of property from a landlord or go buy a house, they are not going to shake your hand and they take your word.
That's right.
They're going to make you put it in. They're going to put it in writing, make sure the terms are explicit.
Right.
And they don't care whether you can read it or not. At the end of it, they're going to say sign it. And then later on, when you come back later on, and it says that your firstborn kid goes to the apartment complex.
Right.
You said, man, that ain't fair.
Or you're responsible for all the repairs,
all the maintenance,
conditioning,
all
roofing, everything is your responsibility. I didn't know that was in there. Well, it's presumed that you read it because you got your signature. Is it your signature, sir? Yes, it is. Did you not read it? Well, I glanced it.
Okay. Well, now you get ready. You get ready to deal with it.
Now, dear, I'm saying that, but I've never read my cell phone contract.
I'm never reading all that crap, man.
It's about what, eight pages.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'm guilty of it, and so sometimes when we're trying to explain something to your audience, it's many times it's something that we have failed to do too. Because I've never read my cell phone contract.
Well,
but that's not detrimental to me.
Well,
because all I got to do is just change to another carrier. But if I put my life
savings into there are some penalties for doing it.
Well, it is too. Yeah, that's early termination. But it's not as bad as it used to be.
No, not really.
It used to be if you terminated early with the cell phone, you still owed for the entire duration of the agreement.
And we don't want to digress, but those types of contracts, because it's required that you have them.
Yeah.
Like your Comcast, your cable bills and all that, cable contracts and all that. And you can fight those even if you sign them. And
I think that's true.
They call those a contract of adhesion.
I think that's true, but also too, but
you can't negotiate them.
But you may miss the requirement for mediation rather than being able to sue.
Right.
To
No,
sue.
they all have an arbitration provision.
Arbitration provision.
They
yeah.
almost all have an arbitration.
Right.
You know, that's the problem.
And then you got to do it in California too.
in Timbuktu.
You got to do it in
Yeah.
Japan.
Yeah.
So all those traps are out there for you. But even though we said what we said, partnership may not be a bad way to go.
Well, yeah.
If you structure it right,
No.
it may not be a bad way.
Well,
to
I
go.
mean, if your point, the whole point of a partnership is I have somebody and we're in concert together.
That's right.
And what I want to do is to be able to put together a plan, and we want to be able to use both of our resources.
That's right.
To make the best of a scenario. And that's what that partnership does.
That's right. That's right.
You know what I mean? So it gives you the best of both people, or both organizations, or both whatever. Because you can have corporations together and become
You could.
partnerships, corporation partnership.
And then you have to have a managing partner.
Yeah.
And then the other part. So that's how we get to the 51%
Yeah.
or 50%.
Yeah.
Because nothing ever will work if it's 50-50. It's just not going to work.
Yeah.
You got to have somebody who can make the final decision about
Yeah.
what's going
Yeah.
on. Just like in a marriage. I'm looking at the angel. when the man say, "This is what we're going to do," that shuts it down.
Angel are like, yeah, in your world, but not in my world.
And so that's why you have to have at least someone who can make the last word, the last decision.
Yeah. And so now we talked about the sole proprietorship,
Right.
And we talked about a partnership. And there's different type of partnerships, and we'll try to touch those
Okay.
inside of the corporation. Then you have corporations.
And so corporations were an invention that came about, again, as people started to do more and more business. They determined that maybe I need something to shield me from having this personal liability. Now remember, there's still, this is an entity to itself, and this is another entity. So rather than having my personal stuff in this corporation, I would not expose. I will shift what I want to shift to this corporation.
Yeah.
And so the only thing that's exposed is what's here.
Right.
This over here is protected
Right.
by what we call the corporate veil.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, and that's where people go around. I'm glad you hit that just the way you did it. So a corporation, you have two types of corporations. You have a for-profit.
That's right.
And you have a non-profit. Now, those are the two types of corporation. Those are the two types of corporation, but there's different ways you can set it up.
And I like that too, Daryl, because when we say INC, that means incorporated.
Right.
So go ahead.
Yeah, and so we see that in a profit or a non-profit, and you have an option. So if you have a non-profit, let's start with non-profit.
Okay.
If you have a non-profit, the rule on a non-profit is that corporation's sole mission has to be not for profit.
That's right.
That's what it is. And most people don't realize this. What was the largest non-profit organization?
You taught me that, man. The NFL.
The NFL.
You taught me that. I had no idea.
Most people don't know that the NFL used to. Now they're no longer.
They're no
nonprofit.
longer- okay.
Yeah, they've
All right.
converted.
Okay.
But they used to be a non-profit organization.
Okay.
And most people didn't realize that. But another ones we see is the American Hearts Association,
Oh, okay.
the Red Cross, St. Jude's. I mean, so what a nonprofit does is, our mission is not to make money. It is on a helpful mission. Okay, and a nonprofit, not to say you can't make money. That's just not your mission.
Right.
Because the CEO of the Red Cross at one point was making some ridiculous amount of money,
Oh my.
which shows you what kind of money they had.
Right.
You know, and I would assume that the CEO of St. Jude's or the commissioner of the NFL,
Right.
you know,
Yes.
when they were nonprofit,
Oh, my.
they were
Yeah.
they you know. So that's not the mission. The mission is entertainment.
That's right.
Right. Which, when they set that up, that was extremely smart to
Oh
set it
my
up that
goodness,
way,
yes.
you know. But, so now, even with a nonprofit corporation, you still need to have bylaws.
Mm.
Because you got to identify, here's what people don't realize. If you have a nonprofit organization, right, and you're going to dissolve, what happens to all the assets?
Interesting.
Let me just tell you, if you don't have a document that tells you what is going to happen to them in your bylaws or your charters or whatever you set up, you have to send it to another nonprofit.
Oh, I
You
didn't realize
have
that.
to send it to another nonprofit.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Most people don't realize that, but again, nonprofit has to stay nonprofit. That's the way it's set up.
And so the other thing too, there is that we got to make sure that people understand that money that comes into the corporation is the corporation's money. All right.
Well, we're going to talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah,
You go on there, huh? You go on there.
We're
Okay.
definitely going to talk about that.
Okay, go ahead.
Because, like I just said, a nonprofit, and the reason why people set up for nonprofits, and because and here's this, you have a lot of levels of nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you got, what we normally traditional here is a nonprofit that's a 501c3.
Right. We hear it all the
That's,
time.
but they got C1, C2,
Okay.
C3, C4, so they have all these different layers for
Okay.
different type of properties. And then they have religious organizations. They have all these different, but a 501c3, a nonprofit corporation, it allows whoever to donate to them to write it off.
Right.
And that's what they want.
Okay.
So they always say, give me your 501c3 number.
Gotcha. Okay.
And here's what happens. Just because you set it up and you say I'm a 501c3, that's not how it works.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how hard it is to set up a 501c3?
I didn't think it was hard at all.
It's
What?
it is a form, a contract, it's a stack of documents, probably 100 pages.
Oh, you got to be kidding. And so I hear people all the time call me and say, hey, I want to set up a 501c3.
You better charge it. You better charge it. You got, because you also have to have bank statements. You have to have profit and more all this property.
It makes
whatever.
sense.
Yeah,
That makes sense
'Cause
too.
it's sanctioned.
Because they got to track it somehow. They got to be able to track what was going on.
Yeah, it's sanctioned.
Oh, really?
It's sanctioned by the IRS.
Yes. Okay.
And a 501c3, when you're a 501c3, you don't pay taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So, when the assessor sends you a bill, they eat it.
Wow.
Because it falls on, when Uncle Sam says, where your money at, you don't own none.
Wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So, but people, and so a lot of times where people, that's what the first thing that they say when they want to do something, and it's a good idea. They want to help the people who are homeless. They want to help this and do that. Want to do a food distribution, and so the first thing they think about is a 501c3.
Right.
But they don't realize what consuming it is, because you got to be meticulous about what it is that you're doing, so
Right.
you don't have that exposure
Yeah.
to some issues.
The way they set it up is normally somebody sets up a nonprofit, get everything set in place and put it in place, and then they try to convert to a 501c3.
Mm-hmm.
If you could possibly do it, which is the way to do it, is to do it simultaneously.
Okay.
Because you have little assets and little stuff that you need to turn and convert it into a 501c3. Because it's like an S corp. You ever heard of S corp?
Yes. Yes.
Most people don't realize. You know what it stands for?
Personal corporate? No, that's a PC.
It's Section S of the IRS code.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
That's
Okay.
all it is.
That's all it is, huh?
That's all it is. It's Section S.
S-corp.
Yeah, that's Look, we're gonna talk a little bit more about this corporation. We'll spend a couple of weeks on this.
Okay.
But anyway, time just ran up on us.
Sure did.
Thank you for watching the show. We'll see you back next week.